A 55-year-old memo was the roadmap of how we handed our democracy over to the capitalists. Today we're going to find out who wrote that memo and why we're all so... Welcome back to the Foreign Report, your weekly foreign policy show that gives you all the gory details of geopolitics with hopefully some laughs along the way. I'm Seena Ghaznavi, your foreign policy zaddy. And with me is T-Seps, Travis Irvine, Columbia Journalism School grad.
Woo!
Wow.
And biggest Cavs fan in the universe. Go Cavs!
Go Cavs.
I'm actually probably not the biggest Cavs fan in the universe. I've been to Cleveland.
Your
and
life
I've
would
seen
be
some
different.
Huge Cavs fans. But as you know, sports is all I have when news and politics are so depressing.
It's, I have forgotten about sports.
You forgotten about sports?
Well, I try to watch a little basketball, but I don't have time.
You don't have time?
No
You just
time.
have it on the background. I'm always doing other stuff when I'm not watching the sports.
We don't have iPads or for the kids, so
Oh,
they use
yeah.
the TV. So if I have the TV on,
You're glued.
They expect the TV to be there watching stuff.
Okay.
So I can't just have like a basketball game on. They're going to be like, no, Blippy. And I'd be like, Blippy's a fascist.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no. We have a bunch of female listeners, by the way.
We do.
I know you don't read the comments, but last week you opined that perhaps our listeners were all men.
Yes.
And then, thankfully, I'm happy to report, because I do read the comments, we have so many listeners who said, I'm a listener and I'm a female.
That's so great. It warms my heart.
Also, my sister, my Aunt Brenda, shout out to my hometown.
So can I say,
female
hello,
fans?
ladies?
I don't know if we go that far.
Okay, we can't do that.
Don't say that to my Aunt Brenda.
Okay,
Definitely
sorry,
don't
Aunt
say
Brenda.
that to my sister.
Hello, Aunt Brenda. Can I say it like, can I do that?
Okay, you know what? Give her a thrill.
We have an amazing guest today. Thank you for all the fans, the comments. They're very sweet. I don't read them.
We appreciate you.
We have a special guest. She is a friend of mine, a friend of the pod, the author of The Color of Money and The Quiet Coup, Neoliberalism and the Looting of America, voiced by your own foreign policy zaddy here, Mehrsa Baradaran. Hello, Mehrsa.
Hello, female fan. Hello.
Hello. Yes.
See, I told you.
The thing was, I looked at the YouTube data, Mehrsa, and it said like we were very heavily skewed male, and so I brought it up, and then all of our female fans engaged and commented and said stuff, so it was really nice.
Yeah.
Because we say we're
also very male. I think most women do
and I think we
go on YouTube.
We do say we are the number one foreign policy show in the manosphere.
Yes.
So I don't
Oh boy. Well, there you have it.
There you have it. So we're doing our best to
Sounds
talk
like
about it.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
I don't This is backfired.
It's the marketing. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
This started off as just a joke, and then now all of a sudden Andrew Tate's coming on the show next week.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Can't wait.
Yeah. Be curious to hear what he has to say about neoliberalism.
I'm exactly. I'm foreign policy maxing right now. Is that right? Is that what I'm doing? So we're going to talk about Lewis Powell today, Mehrsa. When you know, for a lot of our fans, when you say that name, it doesn't trigger necessarily a specific memory.
No.
And honestly, that was by design. He was a corporate lawyer and then a Supreme Court justice appointed by Nixon.
Yeesh.
And he's the author of this 1972 memo that we're talking about today, entitled Attack on the American Free Enterprise System. This memo would be used as a roadmap or a master plan, if you will, to not only help corporate America make an extra buck, but to fundamentally reshape what America is politically, culturally, and intellectually. Take Project 2025. Don't just draw like a circle or a roundabout line or a squiggly line. You could do a straight line, straight from the memo to this. Mehrsa, was that an okay summary of Lewis Powell and his impact?
Yes. I don't abide by like a great man view of history or like an evil villain. You know, there's like, I think there's trends and tides and context and people just step into roles. But Lewis Powell is like almost like the perfect Machiavellian villain of neoliberalism. And it's like he got away with it, you know, like he is like uniquely like careful. He's the guy that liberals think of that is like Roe versus Wade. He opined Roe versus Wade. And Bakke, the affirmative action decision. And yet his legacy is so evil. It is so evil. But in like a Machiavellian, under the covers, he was just like the strategist guy, right? And was one of these old Southern gentlemen who saw the world changing and was really upset about it, had a very high status position. He was a CEO at Philip Morris, the CEO of Philip Morris he's on the board, right? Not the CEO, but on the board of directors. And the guy that helped Philip Morris like throw in fake science when they were getting attacked about the carcinogenic effect of cigarettes, helped them evade that entire thing. He's on the Richmond School District Board when integration happens, and he doesn't do what the South does, which is like massive resistance to integration, but he makes it so that no children integrate in Richmond through like a maneuvering of the law, right? Then that's like precursor to, then he writes this memo in 1971 or two, a secret memo to the Chamber of Commerce, where it's like a rallying cry to businessmen to say that we are the victims of American society. These civil rights people have no idea what they're talking about. The real victim is the American businessman. And you see this like resonating in today, like this victimhood narrative. They're always losing the tides, against the tides of history. Things are changing. And so he creates this plan, right? One is to go at universities to make sure that like articulate, defenders of capitalism are at all the top universities. That's how you get like the entree of like Milton Friedman and Hayek thinking in Chicago and law. You have Yale going Federalist Society because of this memo. You have the Olin Foundation that creates the law and economics framework, which is this idea that corporate profits are more important than anything else, really. Hugely influential on that realm. And then in his 70s, he reluctantly becomes a Supreme Court justice. Apparently, Nixon had asked him several times and he had denied it. But and he's old, right? You don't want an old guy because you want like his lifetime tenure. But Nixon says rightfully that like 2 years with Powell is worth more than 10 years with any other justice. And he ends up being on the court for a lot longer, but creates these decisions that end up like creating little landmines that explode later. So one example is Buckley versus Vallejo in 1970, where he basically opens the door to Citizens United and excess money in politics. Gives corporations the First Amendment rights. So the whole line of cases there, Marquette, which is basically unraveled usury rates across the country. So the reason you can get 300% APR loans, that one decision alone completely changed the economic system. That was Powell. I could go on. All the race decisions, he basically makes it so that Brown versus Board of Ed is effectively overturned, but by name only. So no more integration, no more busing, no more attempts at actually remedying this thing. He does what he had done in the Board of Richmond onto the Supreme Court itself. So the man's legacy is just profound and dark, and he's just forgotten, I think, and should be more hated.
That was incredible. That was incredible. It was like that clip.
Good opening salvo.
Yeah, that was great. That was incredible. You covered it all. But let's take a step back and talk to me about the context of what was happening. You were saying Lewis Powell didn't like what was happening in the world at that time. And right now, in that time period before he wrote that memo, right, we had like the Vietnam protests. There was that the Capitol bombing. What else was happening around that time that created this emotion in him?
Good question. Because in the memo, he says in there, the most dangerous person to American capitalism is Ralph Nader, right? He singles him out, calls him out 3 or 4 times. And it's because it's not just civil rights and women's rights. It's also the environmental movement is coming online in the 70s. And here's a man who works at a tobacco company and is like very embedded in like the oil and gas sector and the defense weapons. Yeah, he basically is defending capitalism against change, not against like communism or whatever, but against reform from within. So what Nader is doing and what threatens Powell so much is showing up at like a GM board or shareholder meeting and saying that GM should be moving toward electric or non-combustible oil engines. And GM was actually considering this in the 1970s. That's the crazy thing. It would have cost very little to literally invest in the future of cars, But there's a couple of oil and gas executives and the Koch brothers invested and on the board who had very much like a stake in this and convinced GM otherwise. So it's that kind of thing that he's opposing. And then civil rights, obviously, he's just like the world is changing all at once. The 60s was across the board, like fissures across institutions. And here he's one of the defenders of the status quo. There are obviously others, Nixon, Bork, Friedman, Hayek, a panoply of guys, but Powell is like a strategist. He's the guy that gives them the language and the legal mechanisms to do it. And himself as Supreme Court justice really effectuates that kind of power and in defense of corporations. So all of his cases are defending corporations against the likes of Ralph Nader.
And it's crazy too, because he wasn't, and you said it in the beginning, like he's this Machiavellian figure, while there were people standing in front of schools to stop immigration.
Yes.
He was just, no one hurt him. He was just in the background,
totally.
Just being like, no, I got it.
Yes.
Hold my
genteel
beer.
Southerner. Totally. So do you know William Rehnquist, right? He's like brash or whatever. So Nixon gets 2 or 4, I don't know. He gets a lot of Supreme Court justices. And it's really interesting to listen to the tapes of him talk about Powell versus Rehnquist. And Rehnquist is known as like this radical left or right wing guy, right? He's like very right, like Scalia. And he's talking about that. And Powell's just like the Southerner that is like genteel. He's so sophisticated. And Rehnquist is a little bit of like who knows, is like a loose cannon. But it turns out that Powell, when he's doing these cases, giving corporations First Amendment rights and allowing them to spend unlimited money on things, Rehnquist is like dissenting. He's like, this is crazy. We're going back to the Lochner era. So it turns out that like, yes, we get wrong the kind of conservatives that were the most effective. We pay attention to like the true racists that are out there like George Wallace, like segregation forever. But like the real guys that were doing effective work were quiet about it. And we're in backstage kind of moving laws around, making sure kids weren't integrating, not going out in the press. And Powell was very, very attuned to what the press thought of him. He'd call it like the East Coast establishment. And so he would use words that were non-racist, very colorblind neutrality. That's him, right? But the effect was essentially that Black people did not get integration, and or economic rights were not noticed by the court. He would say things like, "Oh, rich and poor, you're talking about class. There's no such thing. Like black and white, I don't see it." So that kind of starts with Powell, like a very, you guys are the ones instigating this division.
So he is this guy. He's Philip Morris. He's like, he broke integration in Richmond, Virginia, and he hates everything that's happening. Nixon makes the EPA, which I'm sure upset him I don't know why Nixon made the EPA.
I can tell you more about that if you want to take a little tangent.
Please, yeah, a little tangent would be nice.
It actually has a lot to do with Cleveland and Cuyahoga River catching on fire, things like that.
Oh, I would
like
love
news stories of those times.
Yeah, and also Santa Barbara, there's an oil spill. So there was a lot of pressure. Again, Nader and Silent Springs by Rachel Carson. This idea that we're actually like polluting the land, right? But so Nixon has to do something. And what he does is he creates the EPA and a sister institution called the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. And essentially, this is a George Shultz. He's a Chicago boy kind of creation, which is we're going to create the EPA to like do the environmental regulations, but make sure that everything runs through a cost benefit analysis that the OMB is going to mandate. In other words, no regulation shall cost more than the benefit to the corporation. So from the beginning, the EPA sort of hobbled by this other agency. Now, that's not to say that it didn't do some good things, but it's not like it's a neoliberal solution to a problem, right? It is, how do we keep it embedded in focusing on corporate profits while pretending to do something? Nixon also does affirmative action, right? So how do you pretend to do something on an issue, but not actually face like the problem itself? Like the way to fix the Flint water crisis, which was existed then too, because Flint was downstream from GM, was to get GM to stop polluting and to move away from combustible engines into electric vehicles, all of that. But instead, it's like, oh, you're going to put on different kinds of equipment into your thing. So it was all just at the margins and measured by the goals of this like neoliberal consensus of like cost benefit analysis, and everything has to be like not a threat to corporate profits in order to even have legs.
I think one of the things that's so interesting about the book, especially, is like one of the pillars of neoliberalism is the administrative state. That is this kind of this like thing that we look to as protecting the consumer, but inherently it does the exact opposite. It actually entrenches the corporate capitalists from being, it allows them to pillage everything, and they get to capture all the things because they have rooms full of lawyers that navigate the administrative state.
Exactly. So what's happened in the law is everything is hyper specialized. So if you are, banking, so that's what I did, banking law, all the banks and all the regulators are specialists in high finance, and no human beings understand that language. So it's like the Fed and the FDIC and the OCC are the government regulators. And then here's like JP Morgan and Bank of America and all these banks, and the regulated are over here and the regulators are over there, but it's the same group of people that cycle through, and then a bunch of like lobbyist firms and big Wall Street lawyers who know how to communicate in this field. And so that it becomes a silo of regulation where they're basically lobbying for their own profits, and then they're lobbying to their former colleagues or their future colleagues, right? So it's a revolving door, hyper specialized. Take this across the administrative state, environmental laws, any sort of regulation of AI, of tech is done by these administrative agencies outside of the public view, outside of a public vote. And who's in the room making the decisions? The very industries that are being regulated. And the ostensible reason isn't like it's corruption. It's that those are the only people that have the expertise, right? So it's the expertise and specialization that neoliberalism allows by expansion of the administrative state, which is also Nixon in conjunction with the Chicago Boys.
So if we look back at this Powell memo, he writes this. And I think there's a few things that really jump out, right? It's this idea that we need to influence ideas, right? This at the education level, at the university level. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I also want to talk about media narratives, the research, the lobbying narratives, and then the courts. So let's start with like the universities, because this is where everyone always complains. These communist universities are all breeding all these leftist liberals, when inherently it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Yeah. So, how this may sound like a tangent, but I'll bring it back. Like, I've been thinking a lot recently about why people get so triggered when you start talking about capitalism. I've had many experiences in the last several months, especially with students, younger people who, you'll talk about like maybe the racist roots of capitalism or whatever. And then they're just like, the way that they react, it's like you've offended their like core identity, and that and it's like genuine, like they're like, you can tell that you're like taking something away from them, and that I would attribute to like the expert propaganda that Powell and the right-wing think tanks that he inspired through that memo. Because what that memo said is, hey, corporations, you need to start opening your wallets and giving money to create think tanks and beachheads at universities where you're paying for your ideas to filter down through society, right? So the left is always just like, oh, grassroots and good ideas will spread. And the right is like, let's create an institution and pay people to disseminate ideas that we want disseminated because they're not popular, right? So how do you do that? Incredible. You create like, oh, capitalism is the way to freedom, right? And so you convince a whole group of people through universities that not only is it like Christian and right, but it's also like anything that's not capitalist is communist tyranny. And you're going to be on like the road to serfdom, right? So you've created these dichotomies, all of which were false at the time, right? But this is Powell's thing, get these articulate defenders of capitalism in these positions. And so one of those guys is Milton Friedman, who has this he starts writing op-eds in Newsweek and is all over the place. Milton Friedman's got PBS specials. He's like the capitalism guy. It's also Ronald Reagan, who is like a GE spokesman of capitalism and then becomes governor. But it's like, you're paying these guys to be out here shilling for capitalism. You see it today, right? There are guys out there paid by these think tanks who are out here shilling for capitalism or anti-racism, right? So it's like a market. It becomes a market at this point. Who are the best defenders of capitalism? What arguments are they using? And so these guys gain a national reputation. And then this idea becomes the fusion of freedom and capitalism. And it's in response, ironically or cynically, to the freedom fighters, right? You have the civil rights movement, the environmental rights movement, the feminist movement, talking about freedom, right? The earth and freedom fighters and all of this like personal autonomy. And here come the defenders of the status quo and colonialism saying, oh, you want freedom? The way to that is the free market. And the only way anyone suggesting anything else, like a community, or anything that's like social justice-y, is trying to fool you into communism. So they create this dichotomy. And that's the reason why a lot of people feel it as their religion. Capitalism becomes the religion, and it's all funded by these right-wing institutions who are paying the salaries of people like me, right? Who would go out and speak on something, but they're getting paid to do it for some organization rather than the academy. And that's also ironically, or not ironically, obviously, I guess, why Powell goes after the academy, is because of tenure. These are, no one's paying you to speak. So you get to be anti-capitalist. You get to, shit on these institutions. And that's what college professors do. And so the right has always been in a tense relationship with academics, but in a great relationship with the academics that they can buy. And there are many, right? People who can speak and write books, but are defending a certain ideology. And maybe they don't think that they're like sellouts. They just believe that, but there's a reason why you're at Harvard and you're getting paid by the Manhattan Institute and you're this kind of fellow, right? That's kind of
they just love my ideas. They just love my work.
Ideas.
Right.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. And it's a bonus if you're like a person of color who's just like, I hate, there's no such thing as racism. Or if you're a woman who's like, there's no such thing as sexism, like right up the chain.
Right. I love the idea of these guys trying to preach capitalism on public television. After Sesame Street, I'm going to talk about why Sesame Street's bad.
Yeah.
So
this was they had this doctrine, right? You had to give both sides a thing. And that was also neoliberalism's trying to get two sides on everything. And Powell was very specific about that. Make it a debate. Don't come in, everything should be a debate. That's a innovation of the right, is to say, well, why shouldn't we debate your human rights, right?
One of the things he talks about is lobbying efforts. And I think at the time of the memo, when it came out, there was like 100 lobbying firms or something. And then, years later, like maybe a decade later, it was like over 1,000 or something. Yeah. I mean, the impacts of this memo were very real. What was he saying about lobbying? How did he prove that out?
Well, he's saying you're under attack. They're coming for you. And he sees it. This is 1970s. Like, they're coming, like the feminists and the environmentalists. And so you need to open your wallets and start fighting in this arena for your survival. So you're going to do it in the academy. You're going to do it through lobbying. You're going to fund these think tanks. And he says, like, you need long-term strategy, not short wins, like 10, 20 years. So on the one hand, he's creating this incentive for corporations to come out and do it. And to be fair, he's not the only one. There are others in this realm convincing corporations to do this. The Koch brothers, the Coors, all of these, William Simon, who's the Treasury Secretary. A lot of these like heirs of big fortunes are out here also protecting their fortunes. So on the one hand, he promotes lobbying. And then when he gets on the Supreme Court, in a series of like 10 or so cases, opens the door to lawmaking for corporate money to directly affect laws. So, for example, one case was the legislature of Massachusetts had laws, as did most states, that if a law that they're considering affects a corporation directly, that corporation cannot lobby. The idea is that, look, a state creates a corporation. A corporation is a legal entity. It is not a person. And so
says you, professor.
Yeah,
says you, radical leftist professor.
Yeah. Mitt Romney told me corporations are people, my friend.
My friend.
My friend. And he called me his friend. Isn't that nice?
The funny thing about Romney being like this now, just like this sane guy, is crazy.
Yeah, right? He's normal.
That's the times you live in.
Yeah. But so, the idea, yes, was that corporations were state created, and that the state need not, this is like a direct quote, need not allow a creature of its own making to attack itself, right? So the lawmakers protected themselves from corporate lobbying on laws that might affect corporations. So if we want to tax banks for whatever, if we want to regulate banks, we don't need banks lobbying on behalf of banks, right? That seems like so crazy now to think about, but that was the law. And so he says, no, banks have First Amendment rights. And so if you're going to regulate them, you got to, outside of like the people that work at banks could always lobby, on behalf of banks, but the bank itself couldn't do it, right? Anyway,
you could use the bank treasury. Yeah.
Yes. And a series of other decisions that allowed for big corporate spending on lobbying.
The big thing in this too is like attack the courts, attack this through the courts, and go do it through the court system. And I want to talk about one case in particular because we invoked Ralph Nader. Yes. And this, to me, I remember when I read this, I was like, I can't believe this happened. Tell me about the pharmaceutical case. With Ralph Nader.
Hard. I'm actually friends with Ralph Nader. I've met him several times. He's a really cool guy. He will leave you voice messages for like 10 minutes long.
Oh my God.
But I haven't seen him since
FaceTime him right now. FaceTime him right now. Does he pick up?
I should call him. But I haven't seen him since I wrote this part, and I would love to ask him if he knew what he was walking into with Virginia Pharmacy. So remember, Powell says that Nader is the most dangerous villain, right? And Nader, I'm sure, thinks Powell is the most dangerous. They know each other, right? That's what I'm trying to say. They're on different sides. And Ralph Nader is representing a group of consumers against a pharmacy saying that they should list the prices outside, right? So it's like a consumer-friendly case, a consumer movement. And they decide, tragically, it turns out, to use a First Amendment argument here. Like, these guys have the First Amendment right to see the prices or something like that. Anyway, so they open this door, I think innocently, but probably not playing the kind of chess that Powell is playing. And Powell sides with Ralph Nader on Virginia Pharmacy, saying, yes, consumers have First Amendment rights here, as does the corporation. And so that's the first case that opens this door, and then he flies through it.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, because Ralph Nader was trying to just protect the consumer from being able to just see the prices of their insulin go up or down. They deserved to be able to see that. And then Powell said, yeah, you know what? You're right. The corporations have the freedom of speech to say these things.
Wow.
Yes. And it's like the first, Powell is seeing a chess board where it's like first step, second step. And he needs 4 or 5 cases to get what he wants done eventually. And it's really interesting to see the rest of the court. So they go with them on Virginia Pharmacy. They're unanimous, great. And then the next case, they're and then the third case, they're no. We don't want to give corporate. What are you talking about? Corporations have First Amendment rights. And he writes a memo to the chambers. It's it's too late. You guys can't on all these cases. It's too late. You can't.
I'm drinking your milkshake.
And the rest of the court is just what? They go along with it. And so he's just you got to hand it to him. Long-term strategic thinking.
This is what is so, and we're talking about it on this show because domestic policy is foreign policy, and the things that he put in place are just reverberating today, and the Supreme Court and all the decisions we've made and how we interact with the rest of the world, I think stems from a lot of what he's doing. The Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. How did those get created? And are those are just, it's not like Powell said, create these organizations, but they were inspired by the Powell
Yes.
memo. Is that right?
Yes. In fact, many of the heads, you know, who's done really great work on this is Jane Mayer. She has a couple articles in the New Yorker, really tracing, like reading their, the founders of these organizations, like journals and own autobiographies, saying Powell inspired me to do this, right? So Heritage Foundation, there's a couple of like billionaire donors here that are relevant. Like you've heard of the Koch brothers, there's William Simon, there's the Coors, there's the Olin, there's the Olin Foundation. There's several of these, you know, oil and gas. Oh, Philip Morris, obviously, a couple of these, corporations that then like open their wallets and create American Enterprise Institute. So that's like pro-capitalism. Heritage Foundation, same, yeah, right. Federalist Society, Olin Foundation, and some of them are low key underneath the list, the you know, politics, and some of them are like overt. So the Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation are overt. Federalist Society, essentially, every conservative judge since, I think, who's the last non-FedSoc? Probably Powell and Rehnquist were the last non-Federalist Society judges appointed by the right. Every single judge has come up from the Federalist Society, which basically gets law students young, and then it's like a network for right-wing judges. And they have like an orthodoxy, you are an originalist, you're anti-abortion, you have all the right arguments. They just groom them. And then the right, you know, gets to pick the next one that's up, right? So it's a fast track into the Supreme Court. That's like a total across the judiciary. This is not just the Supreme Court. This is the appellate courts, lower courts, lots of courts. And the FedSoc also, you know, has like other types of lawyers and lobbyists and all of that. And then Heritage Foundation. So for example, when Reagan comes into office, the entire administrative state, like the personnel, comes from the Heritage Foundation. So the Heritage Foundation basically moves en masse into every agency, and they're ready with, before there was Project 2025, there was a mandate for leadership. That was a 2,000-page Heritage Foundation, you know, across every agency saying like, oh, we need the oil rigs here and there, and we need to cut this law and that law. And it was like their corporate donors telling them exactly what they wanted, going into policy. Day one, it's ready to go. So that's, I mean, the right, it's like really impressive what the right can do because they're so organized.
Thank you for this. Is I think our audience is going to really appreciate it because this is an incredible like download of who this guy was, and he's like, no one knows him. No one talks about this guy.
Not enough.
Not enough. Let's make him infamous.
Yes.
Can you tell us the sentiment of what you're talking about? What we can do that's basically the inverse of the Powell memo.
Yeah, you know, to think strategically about the law and what is possible, you know, in the given forms. The thing that the right has, and I thought a lot about like what motivated these guys was fear of losing the status quo. And I don't think anything is as great a motivator as I have a shit ton of money and they're coming for it and I need to protect myself, right? And so they created these organizations. They were so effective and quiet and strategic. And, you know, for the left, our goals are usually like collective liberation or some like, you know, just, you know, not as fear-based. It's more like utopian or, you know, at least fear of like what could go wrong rather than fear of like losing our stuff. And so I think it's harder to organize on those terms, but there are so many cool ways of doing it. And it just relies on people attaching to the same story. So the GameStop, for example, like everyone was like, oh, we're going to take down these hedge funds, and it just hit and people bought in. Now, I don't think that was going to be like the answer, but it was like so many people invested in this. Just recently, there's this Let's Buy Spirit Air. That's what I talked about in my reel yesterday, is like this guy, and I don't know if he's genuine or not. I'm not endorsing this platform, but he was just like, let's make a people's airline, right? It's in bankruptcy and everyone donate like $45, but pledge, not give him money, right? Pledge $45 and we'll buy this together. And like the site was down within minutes, and so many people have pledged already. So there's like a hunger for that. And there's an ability to do that through the law, is to create different types of organizing around, like, why not create a corporation? And this is what Ralph Nader did that made him so dangerous, is they would show up to GM's shareholder meeting knowing these are like all Harvard grads. Like half of Harvard at one point went to go work for Ralph Nader. They call them the Naderites. And they would go in and use actual corporate documents within the law to push for change, right? So they came to the shareholder meeting with 3 board members that they wanted, one like black preacher guy, one woman, and one environmental activist. And they were like, we want these 3 issues represented on your board. Now they lost, but it created a big scene and created a backlash, obviously. But Nader would do this stuff all the time. Like the Virginia pharmacy case is one, obviously, that went wrong, but many cases. He single-handedly got GM to put seatbelts in cars, right? Went after the tobacco companies, went after oil and gas, like through law. And he did a litigation strategy. And I think the left is still stuck in like the old path of let's go to the courts, let's fight for these things in the agencies. And I think we need new strategies of let's pool our money, let's create different corporate structures and just buy these companies. My dream is like create enough money and then use leveraged finance to buy up the weapons manufacturers, like in one fell swoop, right? How much money do we need? How much can we pool? Just there's 3 monopolies, Halliburton, Raytheon, Palantir, just buy them, right?
We're doing it. We're starting here.
We're starting it now.
Let's do it.
Mehrsa, thank you so much. The book is The Quiet Coup, Neoliberalism and the Looting of America. You can
excellent
get the
audio
print
narrator.
Version. It's an audio narration by your FP Zaddy.
What?
Yeah.
I get to hear your voice more?
I recorded it across the hall.
I love that.
Yes, he can talk you to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does every night.
Actually. You know, it's funny. I was going to go over your book just to prep for this, and I was like, I should play the audiobook. I was like, I can't listen to myself.
Yeah, you can't listen to yourself. I can't listen to my own book either.
Yeah.
Not because of your voice, but because it's just,
It's too, I get it. Mehrsa, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Welcome back to the Foreign Report, your weekly foreign policy show.
Great interview.
So I love her. She's the best.
So smart. And I'm excited to listen to the audiobook so I can listen to you talk more.
It's like 15 hours.
All right. Maybe I'm going to recommend it to the audience.
Higher speed.
Ooh. And then it's like you took a bunch of helium.
12 hours.
Yeah.
No, but they do. That's what I thought too. But no, they fix it. Oh, I go 1.2.
Oh, okay.
On all audiobooks, I'm 1.2.
Yeah.
What do you guys do out there? What do you guys do? Let us know.
I don't read and I don't listen to audiobooks.
You don't read?
I can't read, actually. It's a classic bit. Can I talk about the interview real quick?
I'm shook that you are not a reader.
No, I'm a huge reader. I was just trying to throw you off your game.
You did throw me off. We just had dead air for 5 seconds.
No, it's fine. Adam will fix it.
No, don't. That's good. That's comedy pause.
That's comedy pause right
Go
there. This Lewis Powell character. These unfettered, I'm always so fascinated by these unfettered, like, no regulation capitalists, because it is just like the consumers would all be dead.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that Bill Hicks bit about the band supposedly had messages of self-harm in their albums and their fans were then killing themselves. And Bill Hicks is just like, what band wants their fans dead? And it's like, to kind of take that point, what corporation wants their customers dead? And apparently, according to Lewis Powell, all the corporations. Let's just kill them all. Then you'll have no more customers. It blows my mind sometimes.
It's a thing we've talked about, too, where left progressive movements are all very inclusive, but it's always all over the place, and there's no organization to it.
Right.
And it's like, every mic check, okay, great, we got nothing done.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
And then the conservatives are like, we're all saying the same thing. We're all in lockstep. We're all, like, doing the same. We're all organized. And then they get Roe v. Wade overturned.
Right.
And so there's something to be said about especially what she was saying at the end. It's like, what are we able to come together and like work together on something? Can we have some sort of baseline level agreement?
Yeah.
And it seems like that's farther and harder to do than ever. But I think that's the key because they're still doing their thing.
Right. Behind the scenes and overtly now.
Man, when I read also like the Ralph Nader thing, that case.
Ralph Nader, again, a perfect example. This man wants seat belts so
Yeah.
people who drive cars can live. And the corporation's like, no, we want him dead.
Yeah.
He's dangerous.
And again, it's a foreign policy show, but there's nothing more instructive about how we relate to the rest of the world than the impact that this man has had.
Yeah.
And, Mehrsa said every Supreme Court justice, basically, every conservative one has come through the Federalist Society.
Yep.
And the roots of it are in this memo. And so we'll make sure we put the link to the memo in the description. But it is to like a free enterprise site. So maybe I'll like download the PDF and host it someplace else.
Yeah.
So,
And domestic policy is foreign policy. The reverberations from 50 years ago are very much felt in the domestic and foreign policy now.
exactly. And so should we get to some domestic policy that's foreign policy as well here?
You know it.
Trump,
What?
in some diaspora news here.
Okay.
Okay, you know how I love my diaspora news.
There's so many diasporas. Which one are we talking about today?
The Cuban Americans.
Ooh, love a good sandwich, Cuban sandwich.
Trump signed an executive order on last Friday, again, ramping up economic sanctions on Cuba. But Cuban Americans are not happy
Uh-oh.
because they don't want Trump to be doing all this economic sanctions that are just inevitably going to stop short of actual regime change.
Oh.
And it reminds me, Travis, of another diaspora that put their faith in Donald Trump,
Oh, dear.
that he would change the regime of another foreign country.
Which one is that? Which one could it be?
But you know what, Travis? He did change the regime in Iran. He said it.
Yeah.
The regime is changed.
It's changed.
The people that were alive before are dead now, and there are new people in their place
That's change.
of a regime. And
So it all worked out.
and so Cuban Americans, if you have a constituency in California that want to vote maybe conservative, let's be honest, it doesn't matter. Right? A lot of Persian Americans that are in Los Angeles here are more conservative. And they could vote Republican, especially if you're in Orange County. That's not going to make a huge difference on a national level. But in Florida, you have a ton of conservative Cuban Americans.
Yes.
And Florida, always something's going on.
Right. I mean, this is where Marco Rubio comes from.
Yes. And so a poll recently showed 78% of Cuban Americans and Cuban exiles in the U.S. would not be satisfied with economic reforms, and a strong majority supported military action. A reckoning between Trump and his long-awaited constituency seems inevitable.
Unless he listens to them and he starts another war that he's going to solve.
Well, it just goes back to this thing of like, I get it. You have an immense amount of trauma about coming from Cuba and being in exile and everything your family or you had to go through. Same thing with Iranians. But I'm sorry. This
Right.
is not good foreign policy for America.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful I grew up in Pittsburgh because it gives me such a real perspective. There's a lot of people from Southwest Pennsylvania enlisted in the military.
Right.
I should send, the guy I grew up, next to war so that my family over there could be freed. I would love that.
Sure.
It'd be great.
That sounds nice.
Drop the Expendables in there to knock them dead. The Hells Angels could come in on their motorcycles, kill all the bad guys. But the problem is we see what happens every time, Travis.
Yep.
They go in, they drop some bombs, which, again, bombs work. When you drop a bomb, it explodes. Usually every time. But it's everything that happens after.
Right. Yeah. Where the new regime is like the old regime, except worse.
Worse.
And way more pissed off. Plus, it's also just Cuba has such a track record of, Fidel Castro escaped assassination and regime change for decades and decades.
They have a museum about it.
He's the scourge of American policy since 1962.
Yeah.
So good luck doing anything down there, except just having a good Cuban sandwich.
That's what you should be doing.
That's where open it up. Obama, he was so close.
Things were getting better under Obama. And again, there's a lot of Cuban Americans that are like, why are we doing... Again, I get it. We're doing deals with a regime that is not good. But, we have to figure out what are the most important things for the United States to do? Is it better to have someone off our shore that's very close, that's very hostile towards us,
Right.
that could be a launch pad for other of our adversaries? Or should it be ones where people are going back and forth, business is going, human aid is going back and forth, and stuff like that? I mean, it's not a good thing,
Right.
It's not like a palatable thing for a lot of people that are coming from there that were wronged and were traumatized. But again, like what this is about, we live here.
Yeah. And soft power. It's soft power is very powerful.
Yes.
And we've talked about it before. And when you lose that, what is left except hard power?
Yeah.
Very expensive, not guaranteed hard power.
And honestly, if you do want regime change, the best way to do that is to get everyone involved, get other countries involved. Why don't we ever talk to Mexico about what's happening in Cuba? Why don't we talk to Canada what's happening in Cuba? Why don't we talk about everybody in South America? Well, we kind of fucked up South America.
Yeah.
But it's like
they're not happy right
they're
now.
not happy. I don't think there's a country. Argentina. But like, it's like we just run rampant throughout so much of this hemisphere that we lose our partners. And that's the best way to go about doing it. How do we defeat South African apartheid? Everyone in the world
shaming.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
What are we gonna do?
I mean, we can get a Cuban sandwich after this. I'm sorry, it's almost lunchtime here in Los Angeles. I'm very hungry.
You're gonna have a sandwich for lunch?
I think a Cuban sandwich sounds great right now.
That's not get you
They
too
got a good one down
carby
the
and you get
street.
nappy, you get all sleepy.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a big old nap too.
I had a side. God damn you, childless man, and your freedom to have naps. Let's talk about freedom to do something else, like North Korea. Oh my God,
the freest country in the world.
so free. We just don't see how free they are,
Right,
And
because they don't allow cameras in.
So in some new reporting from Militaire RNYI, it's just like a very weird military site.
Yeah.
And they drew their analysis from Bloomberg. A critical shift is happening in North Korea. There was a balance where they didn't have a lot of long-range nuke weapons.
Okay.
But now things are different.
Oh.
There's a report that says that Pyongyang has a nuclear arsenal that is rapidly approaching a quote-unquote tipping point where it could overwhelm the U.S. ground-based mid-course defense system, which is our missile defense system that we currently have in place. If missiles come to America, we've got stuff on the ground to shoot at the missiles.
Got it. So almost like an Iron Dome, but not nearly as extensive.
Buddy,
Yeah?
get ready for your dome reference.
Oh, here we go.
And let me tell you, you're going to get some dome. Current estimates suggest North Korea may have up to 50 to 60 nuclear warheads and the capacity to produce enough fissile material for an additional 20 warheads every year.
Whoa.
They used to be at 6 when Trump was in his first term. Now they're at 20 every year.
Dang.
One proposal on the table to counter this. And by the way, these rockets, these were like they can reach the United States.
Already.
They can reach the United
I
States.
thought every time they did a test, it just like kind of went up in the air and came back down.
There's a lot. You guys can look. We'll put the links in here.
Yeah.
They're showing the range of their rockets now, and they can go far.
Wow.
Think about it. They don't have anything else to do other than oppress their people and make nuclear weapons.
Sounds fun.
No one's messing with them because they have a nuke. So we're not gonna pick a fight.
You're telling me having a nuke is almost like a deterrent?
Oh, buddy.
Oh, boy. All right.
So
That's for another show.
So the big proposal right now is that, and I want all of our audience to prepare a very robust eye roll,
Okay.
is that the United States will build a Golden Dome.
Dun, dun, dun.
Trump's-
Wow. I love the name already.
Yeah.
What a dome.
It's Trump's
That's
dream.
what I call my toilet. All right. You get it.
It's Trump's dream of a satellite-based missile defense system. So Dream is, I guess, doing a lot here,
Sure.
right? Because initially Trump said it would cost $185 billion. That's not bad.
Still so much money.
No, Travi, come on.
What is it?
185?
If you put that into soft power, North Korea is going to be opening their border and we'll be all snuggling
That's
soon.
a bunch of Pentagon toilets.
Okay.
185.
Right.
Now the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, puts it at at least $550 billion.
Okay, this is more money.
Which is like, okay, we're over $500 billion. And now independent analysts are estimating it to be over $3 trillion.
Oh my God, $3 trillion. Hungry people.
No one's
and
getting healthcare. Yeah,
education.
No.
Save the earth.
No.
Anything.
No.
Just war.
War.
Pumping into war.
No food. No clean water. But we will have rockets in space or satellites that trigger rockets in space.
This reminds me of the Ronald Reagan Star Wars plan. Where he was just going to sink, or like the 80s were just taking away rights from working people and pumping it into Star Wars.
I'm telling you.
But not the movie.
I've said this on the show before.
Yeah.
The Space Force, which is what this is all going to be gone through,
oh my God,
is going to be his legacy. That is going to be the most important thing this man has ever done. And that it's not even like he invented it. This was in the Pentagon's plans for a long time.
Sure.
This is the mock-up of what it would look like to do it.
This just looks like a tool show.
It looks insane.
Lasers.
So let me zoom in here. I'm sorry,
I feel
folks
like I'm
that
at
are audio
at
listeners.
a concert right now with all these lasers.
I'll try to explain it. Right now, what you're seeing is a THAAD battery and ships and other rocket launchers and a missile field all on the ground, right? And what happens is we have radars and stuff to detect missiles that are coming. That's why the Greenland thing matters so much. We could detect it. But what this is showing is that we would have all of these satellites in space that are talking to each other, that are watching everything happen from the sky, and then assessing whether to shoot the incoming missile down or when to do it. And you have multiple opportunities to shoot a missile down. So if the first one doesn't work, the second one doesn't work, you have a third option, and even a fourth option to do it.
That's so dumb. I hate it.
So this is crazy. When I was reading it and I was like, oh, $185 billion, that's like, honestly, it's like, I get it. It's like
drop in the bucket for
I've
the
been doing
Pentagon.
this show long enough where I'm like, it's not that much, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets to $3 trillion.
Right.
And you're like, oh, okay, that's exactly what's going to happen. We were just also reading today, like the ballroom.
Yeah, the ballroom price just keeps going up.
Ballroom's like at $1 billion.
It was at private donations to start, and now it's like, no, we're going to need some tax money too.
We're going to need like $1 billion in tax money to secure the ballroom. This is all
dude, you could build
crazy.
So much housing for unhoused people, which we already have a crisis with that, for affordable housing in the country. I'm about to make a second Bill Hicks reference where it reminds me of his bit about all these lasers and satellites and everything. Couldn't we use that same technology to get food to hungry people?
And this is what's even crazier. We get it. There's the Iron Dome for Israel. How big is Israel?
It's not that big. It's not that big.
So if you look at Israel, they've got the Iron Dome, right? And the Iron Dome protects Israel. Israel is the size of New Jersey.
What?
Okay? It's roughly the size of New Jersey.
New Jersey has its own Iron Dome. It's just the pollution hanging over.
Exactly.
On top of
They got a turnpike. That's enough. No,
yeah.
It's a big enough deterrent.
They got Chris Christie blocking everything. Thanks, folks. All right.
He says, what a low blow. What a low blow.
Sorry, he's my good personal
Sound off
friend.
in the comments, folks.
He's my good personal friend, Chris Christie.
But America obviously is huge. So the big issue is even our current system is only successful like nearly 60% of the time. We would need missiles everywhere.
Right.
We would need launchers everywhere, going off all the time.
That's probably what it'll be.
Oh my God.
How exciting.
All right. Well, folks, stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But you're going to hear a lot more about that because it's going to get approved.
Yeah.
It's like this is
Yeah, between that and the ballroom, Lindsey Graham is just bricked up and just like, hell yeah.
we got this space thing. We're never going to get help.
It's too
any
expensive.
one of these
we
things,
can't do daycare.
even the low estimate of this could solve hunger in the entire country, could solve the homelessness in this entire country. All this stuff, $3 trillion that would pay for healthcare for years.
Incredible.
But no, we're such a douchebag country that we need to have a golden dome. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
It's late stage capitalism, folks. Enjoy it while it lasts.
Tied it all together. Thanks, Lewis Powell.
Thanks, Lewis. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do everyone's favorite corner, the JD Vance Corner. Welcome back to the Foreign Report. I'm Seena Ghaznavi, Travis Irvine. We talked about a bunch today. We've talked
Big
about
show, meaty show.
Lewis Powell. We went through all the stuff with him, how he is like the architect and the inspiration behind so much of the stuff that's handed our democracy over to the oligarchs. And then we talked about Cuban Americans being very upset with President Trump, and North Korea, which we don't talk about much, but listen, it could come up a lot more in conversation.
Sure, yeah. And in the air, in the sky.
They could overwhelm us with nuclear weapons.
We have to talk about it.
Great. By the way, we don't go on after them.
No?
Because they have one already.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, it's time for everyone's favorite segment.
Give me a chance, it's JD Vance. No, wait, he sucks.
Club remix, ladies and gentlemen. Club remix, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's go.
You want to know how bad JD Vance sucks? It's been a meaty show, so we'll keep this short and sweet.
Yeah.
Which is honestly what JD Vance's political career should also be. This is a new poll. Trump, by the way, is at his all-time low popularity. He's lower than George W. Bush at this time. He's lower than Joe Biden at this time. So two past presidents he loves to throw under the bus. He's lower than Obama ever could be.
Yeah.
But along with that, I've got some good news for our listeners who hate JD Vance. JD Vance approval rating has now fallen to the record low of 35% amid Trump's declining popularity, according to ABC polls. This is huge because, as we always say, JD's going to supposedly inherit the MAGA movement in 2028. Bro, this is why it's so hard for vice presidents to continue the legacy of the presidency that they serve. So few do it, unless, of course, the president, God forbid, dies well. The vice president, if the president dies in office, that's usually when vice presidents get into the presidency. I mean, no one's really done it since George H.W. Bush. I mean, vice presidents are doomed. And JD Vance, 35%, dude.
Yeah.
They are hanging.
Isn't that, I know that's the lowest, but man.
I mean, this is lower than Dan Quayle.
It just feels like it should be lower.
Oh, don't you worry. That's the fun part. It's not going any higher, man. I don't see any of this turning around anytime soon. So that is at least, again, some good news. Just if you don't like JD Vance, which we don't.
Yep.
Not this show. Record low, dude. 35%. That's abysmal. And same with Trump. I mean, this is just, how much lower can it go? How many more assassination attempts can give you a little bump for a day and then the economic reality hits again? I mean, you can't make up numbers, dude.
Yeah.
People are feeling it everywhere. So congratulations, JD. You are inheriting all of this mess.
It's almost like when you betray the very founding principles that you even ran on and told
100%,
everyone about.
100%.
People are going to be like, hey, wait a minute.
Right. And that's exactly what, we've seen it. JD's had to go out there and try to explain it to people, and he's getting heckled.
Yeah.
He's getting heckled at his best friend Charlie Kirk's events.
You can't redefine what the word cuck means. It means what it means.
It's going to mean what it means.
Yeah.
And
so you can't go out there and try to end run around it. You're just,
Exactly.
you're sitting there watching it.
Yeah. And you can't go out there, and I've seen Tim Scott. There's so many Republicans who are doing it. People of the Trump administration, they're going out and they're saying, actually, the economy is really good. Things are actually getting better right now. And it's like, no, they're not. You can't lie to people's faces. You can't serve them a turd sandwich and call it a cheeseburger.
It's just incredible. I mean, Trump can do it. He could just plow through it.
He's the best at it.
No one buys JD Vance trying to do it.
That's the thing, man. He don't got that swagger.
He doesn't have the
He
juice.
doesn't have that I've been lying to people for decades and decades in real estate type of swagger. So anyway, 35%, folks. A little piece of good news amongst all the bad news.
Yes. All right, guys. That's a bit of the show for today. Make sure you get on our mailing list to get the newsletter, and in case you missed it, let us know what you think about that. We kind of changed up the format a little bit to give you more of like the links and summaries of the stories we cover and some updates and stuff like that. Producer Danielle's doing an amazing job with that. Hit us up on all the socials, and of course, we'll see you next week.
And I'll see you in the comments when Seena doesn't read them.
I will not read.
Especially the female listeners. Thanks for listening, Aunt Brenda.
But you can call me Aunt Brenda.
Don't you dare.
See ya.